Hey everybody, this video is to walk you guys through your first essay assignment. So in this unit, you guys read different texts from various authors across these short stories. They all come from different movements, different time periods, different um, historical or biographical backgrounds. So what you're going to do is basically choose one of the stories that you read in this unit, develop a literary analysis essay over that work. So you need to contextualize these by integrating the literary terminology that you've learned from the course lectures, so things like characterization, setting, point of view, etc. You're going to want to create a concrete argument about one of those foci and include specific main ideas supported by good evidence from the text. So what does this actually look like? This means that you should look at the stories that you read, and while we discussed a ton of different literary elements found within them, things like themes, symbols, metaphors, imagery, dialogue, conflict, I would suggest, maybe one primary element to kind of focus on. So that could be something like characterization, it could be something like plot, theme, and think about what it is that you want to say about that particular use of that literary element within the story. So, for example, in let's say Hills Like White Elephants, if you choose to focus on symbolism, there are multiple symbols throughout the story that are really important. What is it that you want to say about the use of those symbols by Hemingway within the story? Are you trying to say that he uses these symbols to convey certain thoughts or ideas around the post-life expat life in post-war post-war Europe? Are you wanting to say that he uses those symbols to disguise the discussion of taboo topics like abortion? Or perhaps you want to say that he uses those symbols to convey the imbalance in power in this relationship between Jig and the guy. So there's a lot of things you can say, but any of those would be a concrete thesis claim. So that's making an argument about the topic. So again, there's so many options within two kinds. It could be about the importance of understanding identity. It could be in everyday use, the characterization or development, say as a flat character or a round character. Say you could talk about Dee versus Mama versus anyone else. If you wanted to talk about the yellow wallpaper, you could talk about the importance and symbolism of, say, the color of yellow within the story. You could talk about the character development of the main character, who is, a nameless character. You could talk about in the lottery, you could talk about the symbols of the rocks and the tripod stool, all these kinds of things. So because there's so much to think about, what is the primary literary element that you want to focus on? Again, try and think of it in kind of buckets of setting, conflict, theme, whatever it might be. What's the argument that you're making about it? What other literary elements then does the author use to achieve that goal? So for example, going back to Hills Like White Elephants, if you're going to talk about the importance of symbolism, you could talk about the symbol of the railroad tracks, but it's also part of the setting, right? The setting is Spain, at a railroad station in the middle of nowhere. Why is that important? What does that tell us about, say, their relationship or life of an expat in Europe, that kind of thing? And then think also secondarily about how the author's own background influences the work, or the historical situations. So again, in Hills Like White Elephants, Hemingway's own background was as an expat living in Europe post-war. How did that influence his discussion of these topics? Same thing in Story of an Hour. Kate Chopin herself was in a difficult marriage, found herself struggling against these powers of oppression in the patriarchy. Two Kinds, the lottery, everyday use, all of these have biographical or historical influences, which are important. What you don't want to do is let it become a history essay or biography essay. You want this to be above all a literary analysis essay. And then think about what critiques you can make in a scholarly manner around the text. So again, critique is not necessarily negative. It can be positive as well. So you do need to include one research source in your work. It has to be cited in text and used and cited on your bibliography. Basically, the function of this is to add credibility to your argument. So if you tell me chocolate is the best ice cream, I disagree with you. There's only so much you can do to convince me of that. But if you say chocolate is the healthiest ice cream based on these studies from Harvard research, scientists, then I would have much more reason to agree with you. So research and support adds from published sources adds credibility to your argument. What you need to do is make sure that you are integrating evidence from the text and from your outside sources. So that means direct quotes, which helps show your audience what you're talking about. So if you tell me again that in Hills Like White Elephants, the railroad track is an important symbol because of X, Y, and Z, then you need to pull in a quote which discusses the railroad track. If you're going to do the same thing in Two Kinds, where she talks about her identity coming together when she plays the piano at the end, pull in a specific quote that shows me that. The same thing with your outside sources. So if you use an outside source to talk about the importance of say the wallpaper itself as a symbol of the woman's madness and yellow wallpaper, then pull in a quote from that outside source that shows your audience that. Quotes are always stronger forms of evidence than paraphrasing. Your essay needs to be 2.5 to 3.5 pages in length, so you cannot write less. If you write less, you have points taken off. You are always welcome to write more than that. It's due on Sunday, March 3rd at 11:59 p.m. Make sure that you write to the minimum, like I said, middle of the third page. I'm sorry, that should say third, not second page. Make sure you write to the minimum. Proper MLA is required, so that means you need to have a header in the top left with your name, the instructor's name, the course number, course and section number, and the date. A title, which tells your audience essentially what your argument is going to be about. Page numbers on the top right. 1-inch margins all around. 12-point Times New Roman, Cambria, Calibri, or Arial font. And a bibliography is required in addition to the minimum page length, so it does not count towards one of those pages. So your essay grade is actually going to be comprised of 2 parts. You're going to complete an outline, so that'll be 20 points of your essay grade. So that's essentially an automatic 20 points as long as you complete the outline and you do it correctly. And then your final draft is 80 points. You'll be assessed on making sure you have good close analysis of the works and their major concepts, good evidence to support your claims, proper number of sources, length, MLA, citations, and a fully developed essay structure, including an introduction with the thesis claim, clear main ideas with good solid evidence and analysis around that evidence in your own voice, and a conclusion. Your conclusion should restate your thesis and your main ideas in new words while wrapping up your argument. So it should be more than, say, a sentence or two. It should have significant presence. You also need to have careful and clear organization of all ideas. So certainly not a comprehensive list, but some things you could consider when writing your essay if you're going to do things like characterization. You can think about archetypes, protagonists, antagonists. Are they primary or secondary? Are they flat, round, dynamic? Literary devices, you could think about similes, personification, foreshadowing, irony, metaphor, flashbacks. Structure, you could look at the dramatic arc. You could look at the conflict. So is it man versus society, man versus self? You could look at the point of view, first person, third person, omniscient. Why does that matter? You can also look at literary concepts like themes, symbols, motifs, style, illusion. And then lastly, secondarily, like I said, look at the historical or biographical context around the work. Think about the social, ethical, and moral issues that are being discussed. But again, don't let this become a biography essay or a history essay. Let this be a literary analysis essay more than anything. So that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. You're more than welcome to reach out if you have questions or ideas you want to run past me about what you'd like to write about. But otherwise, go ahead and move on.